What is up, all? Sorry, little technical difficulties. When you can't get the computer to turn on, you can't start a show. But yes, Pac-12 Preview-ish is here, preview review-ish. I'm going to talk about the game that was a national championship game. What's that you say? What? Oh, Georgia just scored again. Absolute madness, absolute madness. Again, sorry for the late start. I am Michael Caratanudo at Diablo00 on Twitter. That is where you can find me. Yes, we will review the national championship game as look, Georgia was dominant. I picked TCU. I got to eat crow. No, it had nothing to do with my disdain of the SEC. Yes, Ohio State balled out against Georgia. Had Georgia played like that against Ohio State may have only scored 10 points. I'll give Ohio State 10 points. Yes. Yeah, Kirby Smart, coaches got his team all revved up to go. That being said, yes, we'll talk about that. And I have a treat for you at 10:30, which is now in 17 minutes. At 10:30, our guy Chris Karpman, the publisher of Sun Devil Source for 24/7, the man that's in the know about everything, is going to talk transfer portal with us, with what ASU had, and even lightly around the conference, because there's some names that came into the conference. But yeah, we'll focus on the Sun Devils, as again, Sun Devil Source, as he covers that. Like I said, for 24/7 Sports. He didn't enter the transfer portal, but I'll let him tell you about that. He will join us at 10:30 to go over that. And we might even have a bonus sports topic for you. That being said, so again, thanks for joining. And yeah, I mean, wow, could Georgia have played any better? And people say, oh, well, TCU, they should never be invited back. Look, when Ohio State didn't score on Clemson, did we say Ohio State shouldn't be invited back? And yes, I do like to pick on Ohio State a little bit, but as you know, as you fans know, Pac-12, of course, picking on Big Ten, that's that. But that being said, it's one of those things where, yeah, Georgia just outplayed them. And I mean, look, the one thing TCU didn't do, and I'll talk about it, adjustments, whether between series, Georgia's dominant, but come on, like it was a different team than last year, like I said. And like I said, their team is very good. It just wasn't the same defense as it was last year, which again, against TCU, balled out, only gave up the 7 points. Only gave up the 7 points. But that being said, like, adjustments, and I'll get into that shortly. But I mean, yeah, look, hats off to Georgia. You go back to back. I mean, they have a real legitimate shot now of winning 3 in a row, in which Alabama never did. So Kirby Smart will want to do that. And considering it's the last year, this coming season will be the last season for just the 4. We go to 12 after that, which it should have been 12 the whole time. And I'm not saying we wouldn't have had the same winners, but look, everybody knows there's a high percentage that we wouldn't have had the same winners had from the BCS. They just had the vision to go to 12, because with 4, obviously there's 5. Well, that's why it's called the Power 5 conferences. There's 5 Power 5 conferences. So one would always get left out. And to me, it's one of those things where it's really, really frustrating. And again, it's not that everybody deserves a trophy. You always hear me say that. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. That being said, it should have been 12 from the beginning. Excuse me. Live TV. Had a sneeze. Excuse me, though. Pardon me. But that being said, yeah, one was always going to be left out. I've talked about that a million times. You know that. But when you look at if you just would have went to 12, and you know how annoyed I am about conference jumping. People say, oh, money this, money that. Had there been 12, I'm not saying teams wouldn't have left conferences, but it would have been a moot point. Why would you leave? Like, I mean, the run when Scott Frost was at UCF, the run they went on, 2-year span, and the second year couldn't even sniff the college football playoff. But then they went and destroyed Auburn in their bowl game. And of course, I know SEC fans, oh, they don't care. We're the best conference. But when we win, we'll talk about our bowl wins. When we lose, oh, well, they just, they weren't into it. So which one is it? So I mean, if it was 12, it would have stopped a lot of it. And yes, am I still annoyed about the 2 LA schools going to the Big Ten? Yes, I think it's ridiculous. UCLA saying that, oh, they're so far, it's going to get them out of what they're behind. I mean, to me, that's just negotiating tactics. I'm not saying it's cheap to run a full athletic program. Obviously not, but we know the money that schools get, obviously conferences get from, well, A from TV deals, B from going to bowl games. And you're going to tell me, so you've just burned all through that. But no one else has. And people say, well, don't say Oregon because they have Nike. Okay, look, Nike cannot fully fund Oregon athletics. I know with NIL, I'm not talking about NIL. I'm talking about even before, like with what donations, it's not going to cover the cost of every single sport. So again, yes, the Nike money is huge. Phil Knight with Oregon is ginormous. Not denying that. But inevitably, you would have stopped. Connect the dots. You could have stopped a lot of conference jumping because with 12 teams getting it, yeah, like would a team like UCF maybe see if if it was there to join the Big 12? I mean, I don't think it'd be all the way across the country in the Pac-12, but to join possibly the Big 12 or maybe the ACC, since they're kind of in that area. And, if you're winning, and obviously the ACC, well, I'll be like, okay, so would it have been, would a school like that, if they're winning? I mean, Boise State all these years, like when they were making their insane run, was that under Chris Peterson? Yeah. And I know to talk, maybe they leave, their conference and try and see if they can get into the Pac-12, the West Coast no, they're in the West Coast Conference, into the Pac-12 or maybe even the Big 12. But yeah, so it's that the 12 is, to me, is going to be great. And yes, will the cream rise to the top? I know because some people said, oh, it's always going to be basically the same four or 5 teams that are going to win. No, that's not true, because in a 12-team playoff, you're going to get games where there'll be excuses from the teams that people, oh, well, they should, they're favored, they're going to win. Just like last week when this was one of the best sound things I ever saw. Everybody saying Packers over the Lions. All on TV you saw. What did the Lions do after they found out they weren't going to the playoffs? They sent the Packers home too. So again, there'll be excuses, there'll be whatever, but 12 teams is going to open it up. So the Power Fives champions are automatically in. It doesn't mean that they're, going to be seeds 1 through 5. I know it's got to get worked out. So looking forward to that. But I digress. To the national title game, in which, yes, it was a national title game. And like I kidded in the beginning, oh, Georgia just scored again. So look, TCU, again, their first game, were they a little wide-eyed? Sure. I mean, you get it. Georgia, for the players that it was their first time, were they a little wide-eyed? Stetson Bennett obviously wasn't, 25 years old. And again, I'm not picking on with COVID. There's a lot of players that are 23, 24, 25 finishing up. Kirby Smart did tell a funny story at the end. I'll get to that. But yeah, Kirby Smart did tell a very funny a funny story at the end of the game with his son, but nonetheless, that's absolutely hilarious. Um, and I look at it, and it's for me, it's one of those things where, but for Georgia, I mean, if you sit there and look at their season and what they did and some of the challenging games that they had, um, it's but it was a culmination. And obviously the semifinal game against Ohio State, I mean, it came down to they finally took the lead and they needed a very badly missed field goal by Ohio State to go on. So I mean, and would have Ohio State done the same thing to A&M? I don't know, because I'm not saying Ohio State wouldn't have won, would have pained me, but at the same time, was it going to be a different game? Yeah, absolutely. So to me, it's one of those things where um, if Ohio State, is there, yes, different game. I get what everybody's saying, but yeah, I mean, 65-7 is your final. Is it a different game? I don't know. I mean, a missed field goal, but Georgia, I mean, just all year long, look, they went 15-0. They went 15-0. Yes, let that one sink in. Stetson Bennett only threw 25 passes. That's how dominant they were on the ground. But of his 25 passes, he completed 18 for 304 yards. 4 of those 18 completions were touchdowns. So you throw for 335 yards compared to TCU's 152, because Max Duggan was 14 of 22, 152 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. Now, he did rush for a touchdown. He did have their only touchdown. He got sacked, did Max Duggan, 5 times, and they had 9 tackles for losses. Max Duggan's final rushing stat line was 10 carries for negative 38 yards and 1 touchdown. Yes, their the running back was out, as we know. Amari DiMercato was his show. 14 carries, 59 yards, 4.2 per carry. Again, trying to feed him the rock, but you start getting down, and yes, you can't run the ball. I do think that Max Duggan definitely missed some passes. I know in the game they were saying, well, throughout the season, but he's a pretty accurate quarterback throughout the season. Yes, there were some accuracy issues, but that being said, it's one of those things where Georgia's defense obviously just took advantage of it. But 14 to 22 for Duggan, 152, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And then, like I said, for Stetson Bennett, 18 to 25, 304, 4 touchdowns. They threw for 335. They rushed for 254. TCU had no sacks and only 2 tackles for losses throughout the whole game. When you look at rushing wise, Kenny McIntosh, 8 carries for 50 yards. Branson Robinson, 7 for 42, 2 touchdowns for Robinson. Stetson Bennett, 3 carries for 39 yards. So, yeah, he was, like I said, sacked twice, but still overcame that because in his 3 carries, he had 39 yards. Carson Beck also got in the game. Quarterback, they gave Stetson Bennett a curtain call, which he definitely deserved, but Beck was 2 for 3 for 31 yards. But yeah, Stetson Bennett, 3 carries, 39 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. And you had Kendall Milton, 10 carries for 33 yards, the 1 touchdown. So, look, I mean, offensively, yes, it's just click. And we say, TCU's defense wasn't up to the challenge. Look, I still say it. And again, no disrespect to Georgia. Hear Jimmy now. You listen to Jimmy, you got to hear Jimmy. No disrespect to Georgia. I think Michigan still had the best offensive line in the country. Michigan had the best offensive line in the country. Now, not that obviously Georgia's was good, as we saw. They kept Stetson Bennett very clean. But the physicality that Michigan had on the offensive line, somehow TCU's defense matched that. So that gets me into the whole adjustments because, yes, between series you're going to adjust, but at halftime, like defensively, You're playing a 3-3-5. Don't tell me that you haven't practiced where you've had guys, 4-man fronts, the way you're bringing blitzes. I mean, that frustrates me because, look, offensively, you could see Sonny Dykes, that offense, definitely trying, like, little things. But defensively, you're calling the same thing. You're making it so easy for them. Now, look, Georgia's very talented. Not that they're not talented, but Georgia is very, very talented, as we know. So it's one of those things where, I mean, when you look at it, if you're TCU, I mean, defensively mix it up. I'm not talking about just, put 8 guys up on the line and then blitz and see if Stetson Bennett can, pick apart your zero coverage every play. You got to mix it up. And it just baffles me how their defense was able to, yes, they did get 2 pick sixes in the Fiesta Bowl game against Michigan. And you're not going to get 2 pick sixes every game, but I mean, do something different, change it up up front. And they're getting just bullied up front, run a 4-man front, send a linebacker up the middle, or on the outside, like mix it up. And that was the frustrating part to me. I mean, to see what Georgia did, like I said, as much as it pains me, hats off to them. Hats off to them. But man, it's one of those things where you just can't. Wow. I mean, like I said, if you're not adjusting is not an option in football. I mean, they always talk about halftime adjustments, but you always hear, and then talking to coaches that I've worked with before, it's the in-between series adjustments. And not just for the offense, defensively, you're thinking of it. But I mean, yeah, TCU, look, had a hell of a year, 13-2 overall. And look, it's definitely going to boost recruiting. People that are saying, and then I've heard, of course, the ridiculousness, TCU shouldn't be allowed. TCU shouldn't be allowed, back in the bowl or back in the college football playoff. Blah, blah, blah. Get out of here. You're ridiculous. Yes, they should. And there are times that Ohio State shouldn't have been let in, but they were. So and TCU and Baylor, I mean, remember in the first one got leapfrogged when they shouldn't have, because at the time, it was just ridiculous. So, but look, hats off to Georgia. It is one of those things where it sickens me. They're talented. They're good, but TCU made no adjustments, so you deserve to lose. But we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, the man, the myth, the living legend, Chris Karpman will join us here on Pac-12 Preview. We'll talk transfer portal and what he thought of the Pac-12 bowl season, because outside of my homer takes, you want to hear some real takes, some fair takes from Chris. We'll be right back. We are back here on Pac-12 Preview, Sideline Sports Network. Michael Cartenuto, yes, at Diablo00. That is for, yes, being a Sun Devil homer. But I can be fair to everybody else in the conference for the most part. This man is a little bit more fair than I, so we'll bring him in, the publisher of Sun Devil Source for 24/7 Sports, who didn't enter the transfer portal, like he said on Twitter. I love that. Chris Karpman joining us. Chris, man, thanks for taking the time. I know it's obviously been crazy. I know I've seen you, but from the show, Happy New Year. Obviously, we're 13 days in. And, look, TCU made no adjustments. Let's start with that. But your thoughts on the national title game. I mean, like I said, I wasn't shocked Georgia won just in that fashion because, like I said to you earlier in the week, I thought Michigan's offensive line is the best in the country, and TCU seemed to make adjustments in the Fiesta Bowl but made zero in the national title game.
That was an embarrassing performance, right? I mean, clearly we knew that Georgia had a lot more talent overall, right? But when you have a guy like Max Duggan and you're on this sort of roll that you've been on throughout the season, you had to feel like TCU was going to put a better showing on the field. I'm in a bowl pool with some friends. We picked Georgia to cover the 13. But I thought it would be close to that, right? I thought it would be close. There's just no way that I could have imagined that TCU was going to get housed like that. And I agree, like try some different things, right? Like get some adjustments. And why did they look so out of sorts by like the end of the first quarter? Like it was kind of weird in a lot of ways. Teams have sometimes just one anomalous game in a season where you just like, who really knows? You just can't have that happen in the national championship game, though.
No, oh, absolutely not. And I mean, they also had, obviously, I mean, they were talking about, I mean, TCU's receiver, this kid against Michigan, he was huge. And then they're talking about him pregame saying, yeah, he probably is receiver wise, like one of the top NFL prospects for the next season. But yeah, no, I mean, if you're not going to make adjustments and the 3-3-5, and I know we've seen it throughout the years and people say, oh, well, it's cute. It works in the Big 12. No, it can work a lot. But like we said, if you're adjusting because you didn't bring anybody up, it seemed like they pressured Michigan a little bit better. I mean, did they really think Georgia's offensive line was that much worse than Michigan's? Because look, saying Michigan has the best, Georgia, obviously, like you said, we know there's talent, is not far behind. But let's look at the Pac-12 bowl season. I mean, it wasn't there were some pretty fun games. I mean, I feel bad for Cam Rising. I mean, a second straight Rose Bowl. He goes out of injury, I know, and we'll get to that and say he's coming back. But I mean, obviously the Oregon-Carolina game, Washington, Texas made a run, but Washington led the whole game, controlled the game against Texas. UCLA losing at the last second. USC, we talked about losing at the last second. Oregon State demolishing Florida. What are your thoughts though of a Pac-12 bowl season?
Well, it was a decent showing outside of USC's embarrassing full job defensively, right? That you can't. That's a joke. And Tulane's a good team, but the perception is going to be Tulane, like what, like that. So that's bad, right? Especially when you have Caleb Williams and you're just scoring at will.
I was just about to say to you real quick, Caleb Williams throws for 5 touchdowns and 450, and you lose.
And that makes you think about what things were like when they were at Oklahoma, where they were playing in a lot of 55 to 52 games or whatever.
Yeah.
That's bad. Like that shouldn't happen, right? And it makes you, he's sticking with the defensive coordinator, a guy who was getting Alex Grinch, guy who was getting a lot of attention for head coaching jobs and everything. And now everybody's like, pump the brakes like really hard. USC fans not happy about that. Not surprised really to see Oregon State have the best showing because they have the coaching, the continuity, they have everything is like baked into what they're doing. Utah, I thought would have a better performance, but when you lose Cam Rising and they already didn't have both of their top 2 tight ends, and it's such a tight end driven thing, and they don't have as much of the elite talent to just like roll out the next guys.
Right. You
saw that was a big problem, which I can totally understand that. UCLA, we know that they're prone to being into some volatile games that are going to kind of randomly who knows what's going to happen, right? So there was nothing that really super surprised me. Washington State going through some coaching transition, right? Lost their defensive staff. Don't really know exactly what that's gonna result in.
Right.
Washington, I think again, like they have a lot more sort of continuity with what they're doing right now. So I think what you saw, not just in the Pac-12, but really more broadly, is programs that are going through more stuff with the transfer portal and coaching moves and all that, they didn't have the same focus and attention to detail and execution in these bowl games.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I always mention about guys sitting out. And I remember the first year, I think you and I talked about this a while back. The first year I was like the curmudgeon, like, how dare you sit out a bowl game this school? But it's like, you see a guy get hurt the year before, and it's like, okay, all of a sudden this guy is not playing in a national title game, gets hurt, gets drafted, but costs yourself millions for going from, as all too well, the first to the third, fourth, fifth round. Like, So I was like, yeah, I get it. You're not playing for a national title. Why play? It's an exhibition game that, yes, fans, schools want to brag about. But now with the transfer portal, before we hit that though, I mean, I get guys want to get where they're going, but like for teams that are going to bowl games, like, are you surprised that a lot of guys hit the portal? I mean, literally the second after the season, is that more of an anomaly? Because I would think around spring ball, that's when you would see the transfer portal guys like entering it more blow up even more.
Business decision, Michael. We're in business decision mode now for all these guys. The focus is much less on team than it is on self. And that, I think that is more broadly a reality of just kind of the where we're at in society, right?
Yep.
I don't think it's necessarily for the betterment of teams or even maybe for the individuals themselves. But that's just kind of where we're at, right? The more that everybody sees their peers doing it, the more comfortable that they are doing it. And like you said, the bowls don't matter to these guys unless it's a NY6 bowl or in the playoff.
Right.
Other than that, who cares if you're in the Alamo Bowl to them? Like that literally doesn't.
But yeah, I got
it. But yeah, it doesn't matter to the players, right? And they're thinking about it in terms of, if I go early, am I getting ahead of the queue on other people who are comparable to me and being able to choose where I want to go? Because there's still a limited number of spots if guys want to move up to get to those places. And so it looks like it's almost sort of a race in terms of the mentality. And then you layer in NIL on top of that, right?
Yeah.
Where a lot of guys are not going to they're not going to break the bank. But you remember when you were 18, 19, 20 years old and you had the possibility of somebody giving you 20 grand or 30 grand, like you were like, oh, that would be great. Right. I would love that. And I would be able to, I could be able to build my brand more. Right. So that, if you go, the thing is that the haves are always going to separate more from the have-nots in today's college football. Because what do kids want? They want the fan bases adulating them, giving them a lot of the attention, getting the followers on Instagram, right? Everybody's on Twitter going, hey, follow my Instagram for my top 7. Right. Hey, this and that, right? Stay tuned.
Hit my TikTok up.
Right. Non-stop, right? Which that's just the world that we live in. I mean, the clout chase is almost more important in a lot of ways than what actually might be better for longer term development.
100%. No, I mean, and look, you and I love always I love talking with you, and some people say stuff and we'll laugh, and I love just kind of being devil's advocate with you when we've sat and talked. But when I look at that, I'm like, it's a total business decision. And as much as I say curmudgeon, we all know Nick Saban is when he's not getting his way or when he's trying to, fake fire up his team to play, Northeastern, South Central, Savannah State, the week before Auburn. But we got to get credit for a win like that. But he blasted TCU and didn't work for TCU too well this year. I mean, so look, the NIL, yes, I get it. It's important. But I love coaches' messages. And again, I'm going to exclude Saban and Jimbo Fisher from it. You still got to come to a place where you're going to want to play. Yes, the coaches get the transfer portal. They're going to be gone. But man, I'm with you, because when those two go back and forth, and Nick Saban's being a curmudgeon, I think everybody, especially people like you just kind of roll your eyes like, okay, Nick, we really feel sorry for you. But speaking of the transfer portal, okay, let's get to it. Well, not so much transfer portal, but I want to say, and I'm kind of springing this one on you, but the Kenny Dillingham effect getting hired at ASU. He wins the quarterback coach of the year. We saw that, but Dante Moore, saw this kid in the East-West game. I was interested to see him because I've seen highlights, but it's different when you see him live on TV, but live. Headed to Oregon. Kenny Dillingham bounces. He flips to another obviously great offensive coach, to Chip Kelly. I know you're probably not surprised by that, but maybe surprised that was ASU ever a consideration for Dante Moore with Dillingham coming down here?
Yeah, not that I had heard.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, I think so many times what happens is recruits are far along in their process and they've established sort of rapport with some coaches and certain schools.
Right.
And then when things change so much, when you go to a place like ASU to make that decision versus maybe already kind of what you know at a UCLA, I think that's part of it. Keep in mind, right? Like ASU has Trenton Bourguet, and Trenton Bourguet was a pretty solid starting quarterback in the Pac-12 with 2 more years of eligibility. And I don't think people realize that he played hurt. Like he had surgery at the end of the season. Like he didn't have his normal mobility. I have a lot of respect for Drew Pine being like, yeah, I don't mind coming in there and competing with that. Because I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, ASU wouldn't take Drew Pine unless it was for sure that he was going to be the starting quarterback. No, that dude is going to have to actually play well, really well, to beat out Trenton Bourguet. So I think what happens, Michael, is you lose Dorian Thompson-Robinson, right? Or Bo Nix, he's coming back. We got 1 more year, right?
Yep.
So I think what it is quarterbacks, they go, where do I have a place to either start my true freshman year or at worst my second year? And is the depth chart cleared for me to be able to do that? And when you look at ASU, it's a little bit more of a difficult picture in that regard. And some guys are like, yeah, it's just the nature of kids. Again, like there's an immediate gratification. I want, to be on the field and all that thing. And then you have NIL. Like I heard that UCLA got a little bit of an infusion of NIL in the last couple months, which ASU is not competing with the top schools in NIL, and quarterbacks is where that has them by far and away an outsized impact. So there's multiple factors, but I never heard that he was considering ASU.
Oh, and UCLA that has no money, that had to go to the Big Ten to get out of debt. Yeah, I really believe everything UCLA says. But that I'm still bitter about, obviously, conference jumping, but that's already done. So, okay, speaking of transfer portal, obviously, the Sun Devils. I mean, look, there's a lot to be filled. I mean, you've talked about it. Obviously, at Sun Devil Source on 24/7, I mean, there was a lot. We knew guys were going to hit the portal and leave. Kenny Dillingham. And like I said to the coaches when I interviewed him, Chris, I said, you didn't have to, you always hear the cliche, you had to hit the ground running. They literally had to hit the ground sprinting just to have at least somewhat of I won't say decent, I'm going to say successful in their eyes, early signing day. But the transfer portal, a lot of guys in. So for Sun Devil fans that are always telling me, yeah, you don't talk enough Sun Devils on here. Hey, I got to spread it out. But what does it look like to you? What are your thoughts of what they've brought in through the portal, depth, what they needed to fill, but with obviously guys that can play?
Yeah, so this is a hour-long conversation that we're going to condense into a very few short minutes, right? They have added more transfers than any other school in the country, D1, 24 so far, still not done. That's on top of 15 signees from the high school and junior college ranks, and they have a couple other kids that are committed, at least one of whom will probably sign in February. So they're looking at more than 40 new scholarship players to the roster. That is a totally unprecedented development. If you had told me that was going to happen even like, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said, you're nuts. That's crazy. Right. And that's as somebody who's covered ASU recruiting professionally for 20 plus years, right? The ASU's never added more than like, let's say 30-ish new scholarship players in a class. So it's like a third more than ever. Like that's like, and they just changed the rules until the last class, you were only allowed 25 new scholarship enrollees in a calendar year. And the NCAA suspended that for 2 years because of what has happened with transfer portal and teams being unable to get close to their 85 scholarship allotment with these rules of 25 per year in place. Okay. So ASU right now has about 45, 46 returning scholarship players, but that number is going to end up shrinking to probably around 40-ish by the time all is said and done. There's going to be more attrition, guys who decide after spring ball, okay, I'm buried on the depth chart, want to try to go somewhere else. Maybe guys who have had their degrees already that decide, okay, that I don't want to play. I'm just going to call it a career. So they're probably going to have roughly a half new roster or slightly more than that, which has never happened in the history of ASU football. Now, on offense, you have some very good pillars returning that you can build off of. And that's a very important thing. Bourget mentioned him already, but Elijah Badger and Jalen Conyers, that's huge. There's probably nobody in the Pac-12 that has a better returning wide receiver tight end duo with guys who have multiple years of remaining eligibility than that. Okay. Yeah. And what ASU did to sort of surround that was they added some guys who are ready to play right away and probably at a pretty high level. Drew Pine is a quarterback, 8-2 at Notre Dame. Cameron Scadaboo, the running back from Sacramento State, he was like 5th or 6th in the FCS, nearly 1,400 rushing yards. He comes in, replaces Xavier Valade. DeCarlos Brooks is more of a Daniel Ngata type mold. They replace him, right? And then at wide receiver, they go out because, while they do have a very good top 1-2 with Geo Sanders supporting Badger, right? Then you have to get other guys. So they got Xavier Gilleroy from Idaho State, who comes with Charlie Regal. Jake Smith he sat out at USC. He's had injury problems. He was very good at Texas as a freshman. Former Gatorade National Player of the Year. Melquan Stovall is a guy who was starting at Colorado State before deciding he wanted to preserve his year of eligibility, sit out, right? And then they needed a lot of help at offensive line because, of course, Ladarius Henderson goes to Michigan, Ben Scott goes to Nebraska, you lose Des Holmes, right? And you lose Chris Martinez, like 4 starters. Yeah. So they add Aaron Frost, who can play right tackle. They add Ben Coleman, who can play left guard. These are starters at very good players at their respective schools. They get UNLV starting center. He'd been 3-year starter already. Joey Ramos is coming back from an injury, and he was a starter. So now all of a sudden with those guys, and then, of course, Isaiah Glass and Emmett Boley coming back, okay, you look like you're in pretty good shape again with your offensive line. So to summarize, ASU's offense has a chance to be even better than they were this past season, and especially with the Dillingham being in charge versus what they have with Glenn Thomas and not taking advantage of their personnel and taking a long time to kind of get everything in the gear that they were able to get it in somewhat to the second half of the season. Now, defensively, they're not as far along, but I still would say that they've done a pretty good job, all things considered, from how much that they had to evolve. Now, in the secondary, that's where they have the most that's returning, right? That's where you have 2 starters coming back at corner, Ed Woods, Ro Torrance. They should be good there. I think people saw that Chris Edmonds is a good safety. Jordan Clark took a step this past year. Well, ASU added a safety in Xavier Alford, who at USC was like one of their best young players. Like he was a very highly regarded guy. He had 2 interceptions against ASU and Tempe in 2021. Then he had injuries that cost him this last season. So he comes in, he's a plug guy. They got Travion Brown, who was at Washington State in their top 3 or 4 linebackers. He has a chance to help replace Merlin Robertson, Kyle Soley. They're going to need additional help there, but they got a couple of other guys in Tate Romney, Crew Jackson. They have the ability to come in and help kind of play. I think ASU is going to need to get a little bit out of some of their returners at linebacker. They have a couple of guys that are maybe ready to take on a little bit more of a role, like Will Schaefer, especially, I would say. And then up front, they added a lot at defensive end. Their ability to get edge pressure is going to be really important. When you lose Joe Moore and Trevez Moore is gone. They retained Anthony Cooper. That's kind of a big deal. We still don't know what Michael Matus is going to do, but then they added some guys who can get after the quarterback on the edge, right? And so I think they need really help at defensive tackle more than anywhere else. They did add a Michigan State transfer who has a chance to come in and be a plug guy to some degree, but they still need more defensive tackle help. They need linebacker help, probably a little bit more. At the same time, and I know I'm throwing a whole lot into it. At the same time, Brian Ward is a guy who at Washington State did more with less. His D tackles were not very good. And relative to the talent that they had, they were as good as anybody in the Pac-12 on defense, along with Oregon State. So for a team that was 3-9 last year and is having to replace like half of its roster and have a new coaching staff, somehow out of all of that, they actually have a chance to maybe be like a decent or better team next year.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, it is for people that keep up with recruiting, because like I tell you, I always get friends messaging me like, "Hey, what do you know about this transfer?" I was like, I know that he can play and he's going somewhere else. But I gotta say, what's up with our damn kicker leaving? What does your kicker leave for? Kicker should never enter a transfer portal.
Yeah, I think specialists, especially like the ones that are perceived as better, they
Right.
want to handpick their coaches. They want to go to where they think that they're going to be able to extract the most from somebody who's going to help them in some element of their game, instead of having the special teams coach chosen for them. That isn't anything against Charlie Ragle.
Right.
I think it's more about like guys want to go to where they think that they're going to have the right relationship and or developmental things that are specific to their needs.
Right.
And that's an area where ASU could be a net loser. I mean,
Right.
Carter Brown, and he's a good player, right? And ASU, Eddie Chaplitsky, he's like probably the best punter in the Pac-12. And so to lose those guys, that definitely does matter. Don't want to understate that.
Right. No, and a specialist too. I mean, obviously you hit the nail on the head there, because you definitely want to, like, if you're working with certain coaches, like you said, it's not a shot at Coach Regal coming in, but especially with kickers and like thoughts and who you're working with it. I mean, that, because everybody always says, yeah, you just have one job, but it happens to be a very stressful job, as we know, coming down the stretch. But okay, so what's your overall, like, any other transfers to other Pac-12 schools that kind of stick out to you, and how do you think other Pac-12 schools is fair? Because like you said, I thought ASU, and not even being a homer, from everything I've seen that you put out, and obviously the guys coming in, I'm like, that's pretty damn good for Coach Dillingham. Now, yes, will it translate to more wins? I'm leaning towards yes, but what about the rest of the conference?
Yeah, so really, I think you look at it, and Colorado had the biggest haul in terms of number, other than ASU. They're sitting on 20 commitments, which is, that's like that's like a massive kind of a thing, right? I mean, everybody's, Coach Prime, what's he going to do? All this stuff. They got Travis Hunter. I mean, he's like the best cornerback, like he's a first round NFL quarterback, right?
Yeah.
And then other than that, they got a few guys that I think are capable of making big impacts, but it's still kind of to be determined,
right,
what's going to happen there. I think USC, they were like the biggest winner last year. I think they were first or second overall last year, right? In the transfer thing. That's kind of how they were able to build up so successfully. They just got Anthony Lucas, who, the Chaparral, defensive lineman who went to Texas A&M. That was like a really big development. ASU kind of really wanted him, but those things are tough. I mean, they also got from Arizona, like two of Arizona's best players, right? So Christian Roland Wallace, I mean, that's a very good defensive back they got. They got Eddie Chaplitsky, the ASU's punter, and they got Dorian Singer, which that's an in-state guy that ASU also wanted, a receiver who's a 1,000-yard guy. So I think pretty clearly USC and Colorado are like the biggest winners. UCLA's also done a pretty good job in the transfer portal. Like last year, they were in the top 5. They've done a good job. I think that this is an area where Chip Kelly, who's not, he's sort of infamous for his disinterest in like getting into a lot of like high profile recruiting battles for high school kids. He doesn't really like doing that. Right. So, I think they have done a good job of getting some guys, linebacker. They got a guy, they got a Cal linebacker. They got some linemen. They got Carson Steele, who's probably one of their best guys, who's a running back. It's kind of hard to keep track of everybody that's coming through, but I think pretty clearly what we've seen is the top tier is like USC for sure, Colorado probably after that, and then ASU, UCLA, Oregon. They're all those teams are in the top 10 in the 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings, and there's more guys that are getting evaluated. ASU really did it in terms of number. They have a lot of guys who are plug guys who have a chance to start and be solid, but they don't have as many guys who are kind of like on the high end stars, if you will. Like they have only one of their guys is currently a 4-star transfer, but then they have a bunch of other guys, as I mentioned earlier, the Scadaboo and Smith, and their linemen who all have a chance to be pretty solid to good players.
Yeah, and then I mean, because what did I see that DJ Uiagalelei goes to Oregon State? And that's kind of, I know he struggled, but that's a weird, was to me. And again, you mentioned it. I get the obvious point, opportunity. I mean, I know Bengal Branson started out as obviously a game manager, and Oregon State could run the ball, like you said, coaching. But by the end of the season, it's like, man, he's really got a seemingly good grip of the offense, and Oregon State's not making mistakes. They're running the ball. He's completing passes. But I mean, DJU's obviously going to have to compete for it because it was an up and down season, and we'll see his psyche. But we're not because of Jonathan Smith. Were you surprised he landed at Oregon State?
No. Like ASU didn't go on him. I think a lot of schools decided, okay, like not that accurate and not a progression read guy. Like big arm, big dude, athletic, right? You look at him, you go, oh, he should end up really good, but he just wasn't there. And they had some issues with their coordinating and Dabo Sweeney decided to move on, right? But so we'll see. But what I think interestingly about Oregon State, they like to max protect, throw the ball down the field. It's more of like they make it a little bit easier on quarterbacks in some ways that I think could work for Uiagalelei. That wasn't the case necessarily at Clemson. It probably wouldn't have been the case at some other schools, but by no means to me is that I have no confidence that that's like definitely going to work out at a high level. I just think that the coaching is so good there that they figure out a way to extract the most from their players. And that even translates to the quarterback position. Jonathan Smith is so good. I'm not saying this to like pat myself on the back or whatever, but I can remember when Utah joined the Pac-12, and I was telling everybody, Kyle Whittingham is a problem. Like this dude is going to be a problem. He is great as a coach. And people were like, I don't get it. Like he hasn't really done that much. And why do you think that? And now people understand. And Jonathan Smith, a couple years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, I'm like, okay, this guy is he's emerging. They're going to be really good. And he went there and he might just decide to stick it out there. So, I mean.
And when Kirk Herbstreit, to piggyback off your point, you're making a great point. When Kirk Herbstreit stopped, making excuses and drooling over Florida, he was saying, they want obviously Florida, and they know in the conference they're in, they want to win now. But you saw Jonathan Smith's record and then what he's built. And they said Oregon State, and Kirk Herbstreit was like, yeah, and this Oregon State team's not going anywhere. He's like, in the Pac-12 next year, he goes, they have the coaching, to your point, because and when you said that too, I was like, I agree with 100%. When Utah came in, I'm like, anybody that ever watched Utah games, like that stadium, is crazy, but the fans are into it, but they're always physical. And I'm like, they have the offensive and defensive lines. Recruiting wise, he'll get those guys in. And since they came in the conference, there was no repeat no repeat Pac-12 champion. Oregon did it in 2010, and now Utah just did it. There's never been a repeat. And people would say, well, there's other teams too. Utah's ruined a lot of teams' bids.
Hey, let's add on top of that something that I think people will find interesting. Utah and Oregon State probably had the best tight ends in the conference, I would say, in terms of, right?
Yeah.
And people watch the national championship game. Georgia, 2 elite tight ends, right? What has happened in college football is everybody went to playing 11 personnel, 10 personnel, and using, all the receivers and de-emphasizing the tight end position. That the tight end position has had a reemergence in a lot of ways in college football in terms of a differentiator and how you can use those pieces when you get into your 12 personnel and 2 tight end stuff. And Oregon State and Utah, they've shown that. And even Oregon, Kenny Dillingham, they had like 3 tight ends that were athletic guys. Like they didn't need them as much as a Utah or Oregon State did. But I just want to say, when you have Jalen Conyers and Messiah Swinson coming back, right? There's a recipe there for you to be able to get mismatches, to the way that you can shape shift with what you're doing formationally so that you get these guys in the box. You were talking about the 4-2-5s earlier, right? The problem is without allowing defenses to substitute, you can go from having these condensed formations where you got 2 tight ends in the box and you're hammering people downhill and they're in a nickel. And then without substituting, you spread everybody out and you got tight end, big body dudes working in space against little bodied guys. And that's also a problem. So there's different kind of ways that these teams are now creating big problems when everybody has gone to more nickel personnel groupings.
Yeah, and I always said it's a matter of time because you always hear, especially on Sundays in the NFL, like, yeah, we get these linebackers are quick, and it might be, 2-3 steps difference, just a yard of separation, 2 yard separation, but they can't hang with some of these tight ends. So you knew in college football, inevitably, at some point, like you said, whether you're playing a 3-4, 4-3, like you said, a 4-2-5, a 3-3-5, it's mind-blowing to me. And I got to go with what Coach Aguano said, because after the CU game, when he was talking about Jalen Conyers and he said he's there, he's like, he wants to be Ralphie. I got to tell him just to run to open field. Stop trying to bulldoze people. So he called him the ASU Ralphie. So I thought that was epic. And after Deion Sanders' smug comments, I hope Jalen Conyers blows them up when we see them too. But before we get out of here, I got to ask you, look, man, a little homerish. I told fans we'd probably spring a little hoops on them, even though it's football, but 90 points last night, 5-1 in the conference, right behind the Bruins. Bobby Hurley, look, we always make a coach, always wanted to play defense because he's always said it. And not just because he says it, he gets frustrated. Well, this team's playing defense, and they're slowly but surely finding their outside shot, Chris. It's pretty exciting, man. All the stuff you put up last night, I'll let you talk about it, but that's pretty exciting in Sun Devil Hoops country.
Yeah, this is, in my opinion, this is Bobby Hurley's best team. And that is because of their defensive capability. People remember, of course, the Zylan Cheatham and Lou Dort team. That was a good defensive team, and there was a lot of things that were dynamic about them. But this is on a different level, even above that. And I was alerting in November, like, hey, you cannot score the ball easily against this team. They are in the top 10 nationally in 2-point percentage defense and effective field goal defense, right? They are in the top 25 in block percentage. They are in the top 25 in defensive overall efficiency. Like, they are really good. They are grimy. They come at you with depth. They have length. They have good help defense. I think the coaching has done an excellent job on that end of the floor. Jermaine Kimbrough, one of their assistant coaches, I think he's done a really good job. And as you said there, like, there was a thought going into this season, people will remember, and of course they had Bagley then, but people thought, oh, this is going to be a pretty good shooting team, right? You had DJ Horn and Desmond Cambridge had made a lot of 3-pointers, and Alonzo Gaffney is a stretch 4-man, right? And then it ended up not materializing. Like, they were outside the top 300 until this last game in 3-point percentage. That's like, nobody really expected that, right? But a lot of catch and shoot threes, when they have the ability to work the ball from the inside out with Warren Washington and Devin Cambridge in particular. I keep saying Washington has a low usage rate for the caliber of big that he is, but he's so good. He has the ability to score with those jump hooks around the basket. He's a great passer for a big man, maybe even the best in the Pac-12, actually, definitely in the conversation for that. And ASU jumped 16 spots in the net with this win over Oregon, which was a borderline quad 1 win, top 75 road wins. Oregon dropped to 76, so it's like right on the cusp there. But ASU was well behind Utah, but then Utah losing in blowout fashion to UCLA dropped them, I think, 13 spots. So now ASU is clearly the third most likely team to make the NCAA tournament as things stand right now. UCLA and Arizona, they're locks. ASU's 40th. Utah is in a very good position, but they're kind of probably still next. ASU doesn't have to play at Utah this year.
Yep.
That's an important thing. And ASU already won at Colorado, at Oregon, already beat Washington State. USC is the other team that's in this same sort of area. And a lot of people were saying on Twitter yesterday, oh, hey, ASU is definitely in the tournament. I just want you to slow way down on that.
Exactly.
Like, if you're thinking that, slow way, way down. The Big 10 and the Big 12 are capable of getting 8-9 teams in the NCAA tournament this year. They have like the Big 12 has 9 top 40 teams, basically. And the Big 10 has like 7 top 40 teams with a couple others that are like kind of in the ASU range, right? So, the NCAA says they don't care, the selection committee, they don't care, like they don't look at it in terms of the conferences, right? And they don't look at it in terms of when you won the games or whatever. It's just like mostly data, right? You and I, we know we're eyeball test people. Yeah. Like more than anything. We are eyeball test people. You look at ASU and you go, this is a tournament team, right? This is going back, 30 years to ASU Sweet 16 team 95 until now. This is probably a top 5 ASU basketball team. They had the Ike Diagu team. They had the James Harden. That was maybe like their the better of the 2 James Harden teams. That was maybe their best. They had the Guard U team that went, 12-0 to start conference play or whatever it was. And then you kind of probably have this team, right? There was one more Sendek team that could be in that conversation as well. But they are by no way, shape, or form a given to make the tournament. They still have a lot of work to do. They can't lose games that are against Oregon State even if it's on the road. You can't lose at Oregon State. They're 220 in the net. They're going to play at Cal and Stanford. Those are bad teams. Like, you have to win those games, and then it's okay if you lose to UCLA, to Arizona, to USC on the road, to Washington State on the road. Like, those are all fine. But I'm telling you, there's a very narrow sliver between this team being 14-6 and not in the first 4, like they're in the 64, right? Like as like a 10, 9, 8 seed, or ending up 12-8 and everybody's like, oh, they're now on the bubble. And if they get in, maybe they're in the first 4 again, which ASU fans don't want to see another first 4 team, I'm telling you. So they have to keep their foot on the gas pedal.
No, absolutely. And, I look at, and just looking at the standings, so you can see, to me, USC's that team. And like you said, people, again, there's a lot of hoops left, but yeah, defensively, I'm with you. I mean, there's a few teams, like the teams you mentioned, and even, the Eddie House teams where they might have a little bit better shooting, but at the same time, like this team defensively would hang with those teams. So I'm with you on that. Like but it's exciting to see, especially this defense and guys, getting back. Cause I know I talked the other day, like I had people messaging me last year in the Arizona game, getting really frustrated that yes, they're down and we understand it's a 3-point, shooting game, but guys chucking up threes and not getting back on defense. Like, yeah. And I go, yeah, believe me, Bobby's going to look at the tape and they're not going to like sitting in the room with Bobby Hurley with that. I'll tell you that right now. I go, as much as people make their jokes and their memes about him going crazy on the refs, like that's one man I would not want to be in the room with. Yeah. Miss a shot, fine, but to sit there and walk back on defense, like not going to happen. But yeah, no, it is exciting. So I just wanted to get to that little homer bonus. And look, Arizona losing to Washington State at home. I mean, and like you said, a loss to Washington State on the road wouldn't be not a terrible thing, but yeah, I think beating USC but you and I know, I will say this and get your last thought on this. There's always that one matchup or 2 matchups where you're just like, how did they lose this game? And unfortunately, knock on wood, I hope they don't have it. But when it does, to your point though, it shouldn't affect tournament things, because the Big Ten, to me, I look at it and I get every conference beats each other up. Some are more physical than others. We know the Big Ten's physical. But the last few years, they've had these teams come in, and then like by the end of the first round, there's like 2 teams left. They're bounced. And I'm like, I get it's a tournament. I get it's one and done, but you're superior to these teams. Everybody's talking you up. And then like 2 years ago, when the Pac-12 had the best record of the conferences, and they would have probably had one more win if, what was it? I think USC had to play UCLA or Oregon. Somebody had to play somebody in the conference. So that, of course, there was going to be a loss there. But yeah, I'm with you on that. When people start saying the Big 12, I'm with you. I see it, and I'm like, that kind of does scare me of what like they could do. But I think if you get a split with USC, you get and if you somehow could be UCLA at home in a week, next week and a half, whatever it is, like that would be ginormously huge.
Oh, that's if ASU beats UCLA, if ASU beats Oregon State and UCLA, they're right there for the Pac-12 championship race. I mean,
right?
absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, they already kind of are, but that would cement that. Like, right? Everybody's going to be talking about that the rest of the way. They, when they expanded to the 20-game conference schedule, that makes it a little bit. You can't necessarily compare in the same way that you did previously,
right?
But remember, ASU never was 13-5. No. ASU was like at best 12-6, right? Once or twice over a very, very long span of many years. For ASU in this era to potentially go 15-5 or 14-6, which those things are now within the realm of conversation.
Right.
That's pretty potent stuff right now. And yeah, Eddie House, Mike Batiste, Bobby Laser. I like watching those guys, but they were not even above 500 in the Pac-12 that year. And they had like nobody else helping them. That was like Don Newman. It was like Don Newman was the coach, and he was like the fourth best player also on the team or something like that, probably.
Oh, man. Yeah, that was – yeah, because Rob Evans came in the year after that, didn't he?
Yeah, I think Rob Evans was 2000, I think.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. 90.
I'll have to go back and look, 99 or –
I think it was his first year when I was in school there just, 2 minutes ago. I actually got to sit down and interview Rob Evans.
It was Rob Evans. Rob Evans was 98, 99. That was his first year.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, and it would have been the 99, 2000 season. I actually got to sit down, went to practice. I got to shoot some stuff, and he was so nice. That was like, not that I didn't expect the head coach to be nice, but when you're first interviewing somebody, you're like, oh God, I hope he's okay with this. Well,
the year before, the Don Newman year, 97, 98, looking it up, that's when they had Jeremy Veal on top of those other guys.
Yes.
And they had Alan Lewis, right? Who was a good point guard. He was like probably led the conference in assists that year. He had like 8 or 9 assists. So that was a good team. But even then they were 8-10 in the Pac-10. Yeah. Right. And look, the Pac-10 was really good. Like there have been some gauntlet years in the conference.
Well, and also Stanford, U of A, UCLA, like it was always a gauntlet every year. That's
monster.
Yeah.
Monster. I mean, absolutely. And so that's the other thing is that ASU, and this is a whole nother tangent, but ASU hasn't taken advantage of the down periods in the Pac-12 as much as it probably has needed to, because Hurley had the opportunity when UCLA was down.
You're right.
Right. And Arizona was down. Like how often are UCLA and Arizona kind of down? Right. That's kind of why ASU, like Bobby Hurley's done some good things, but then also relative to what maybe was possible, I don't think he maxed ASU out in earlier periods. Right. But right now you look at it and you go, well, how often are Cal and Stanford this bad and Washington this bad? Like very rare. Yeah, UCLA is really good. Arizona's really good. That should be expected, right? But ASU has a chance to very, very solidly be at worst the third best team in the conference. And that can get you, like ASU hasn't been better than a 6 seed in forever.
Right. Oh, right? Yeah.
So like that's possible. If they finish really strong, you cannot rule out that. I'm not saying that that's not likely. Don't get me wrong. Likely is probably somewhere in the 8, 9, 10 range, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, look, I look at it this way. And if people are saying they're in tournament, if you're going to be optimistic, and like I said, let the season play out. But if you can play defense and you'll travel, you get a win either at UCLA. And like you said, they don't have to play at Utah, or if they are able to go down to Arizona and return the favor, which would obviously be very tough, because that'll be, again, a little bit later. you do that, it would be very tough to not make the turn, like not be, you know, in the first four. So yeah, I mean, I would think this team, and I'm with you. I mean, optimistically, I say could shoot definitely for a 7 seed, because I get the other conference, I get depending, but if for somehow you beat UCLA twice and you beat Arizona, like
slow down.
I know,
Slow
I
down.
know, I know. I'm just saying if
beat UCLA twice and they're gonna and
I'm saying
on. I mean they're
that would be definitely a 5 seed to me. You're a 5 seed.
Oh
So
yeah.
well, he is Chris Karpman, and yes, it's always great when we get to chat, catch up. But yeah, hey, thanks for the football knowledge. Obviously, you can follow him on Twitter at Chris Karpman. He is a publisher of Sun Devil Source for 24/7. Where I love where you said you didn't enter the transfer portal. That was great. But hey, man, thanks for coming on. I know I will see you at a hoop soon, and appreciate it, man.
Hey, listen, pound, respect my decision. Pound, no interviews, please.
That's awesome. Right. He's a comedian. He has it. He has it. All right, we're gonna get out of here, Chris. I appreciate it, my brother, and I will see him soon. Oh man, that is just recruiting comedy. Love it. All right, we're gonna get out of here again. Thank you, everybody at Sideline Sports. Obviously, we will see you. We're doing a lot for the Super Bowl again on Sideline Sports. You have my Twitter handle at Diablo00. Again, be doing stuff for the Super Bowl, getting to catch up with former Pac-12 players, because there's always quite a few, that seem to be making it into the game. So we'll see what happens. But that being said, I'm going to get out of here. I want to thank Chris. Thank you guys for joining. I will see you on Monday, actually, because we're going to wrap up Wild Card Weekend and drop stuff for future things as well. So I will see you on Monday, hopefully with no technical difficulties. The computer will turn on as it did. So yeah, going to get out of here. Everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy the playoff football. Again, congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs, national champs again, back-to-back seasons, CFP champions. So congratulations to them. We're going to get out of here, and yeah, enjoy your football. Have a great, safe weekend, and I will see you Monday. And as always, the homer in me forks up.